मंडलाकारं व्याप्तं येन चराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। ज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनं शलाकया चक्षुरुमिलितं येन तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वर गुरुर्साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। From young age he has described that I was born in a Muslim family, but from a very young age my interest was always first in spiritual matters, and more than that in the Hindu way of life and Hindu philosophy. How could this come about when you are born in a particular setup and when you are trained from childhood in a particular religion? Is it possible for the mind of a young child to shift from one way of thinking to another at that age? இந்த மாதிரி ஒரு question வரும். Fact is, I believe, and it is also my personal experience, that one passes through many lives. What we see in this life is a very short life from birth to death, but before this there have been many more, and after this there may be many more to come. So there are many influences working inside our mind which move us towards a certain way of life, which is why in one family you may have 4 children and the 4 children may turn out in 4 different ways. In the same way, there is a possibility that someone who was influenced in his past one life or many lives in a particular way of life is born in a different setup in this life and continues to move along this path. Now this biography of mine, which is an autobiography, apprentice to a Himalayan master, a yogi's autobiography, is an attempt to put to the public, to the readers, these experiences which I have had since my childhood. Some of them even cover a little bit of what is before this life, which people may believe or may not believe. That is not the intention is to make one understand what I have experienced in my life from childhood to now. I am 63 years old now. This is the whole thing. Now, it is also an attempt to show that one can also live a normal life, so-called normal life. You may not be absolutely normal. Have a family, have your children, do your work, earn your living, and still be spiritually inclined. There is no bar on this, provided we are a little careful in what we do and how we live. Now, there must be a basic starting point for all this. It has to be somewhere where I really began to see something different, and that point I would say, first of all I must say that what is the truth from this philosophical and religious point of view, spiritual point of view, cannot actually be expressed in words. And when we express something in words, actually it cannot be the absolute truth, because truth cannot be put into any language or any words. So we can only describe our lives and how we are connected to that truth. We cannot actually describe the truth because it is not possible to do so humanly. So what I am trying to start with now is the first point, which you might call the first impulse, which prompted me to move in this direction of understanding the spiritual truths. Why understanding the spiritual truths? Going from the southern end of India, which is in Kerala, in Trivandrum, go straight up to the Himalayas at the age of 19. Now there has to be something that ignites this, some process, some impulse, and that impulse, I will tell you a little story about how this happened to me when I was a small child of around 8.5, 9 years old. Now, as already I told you, my parents belonged to the Islamic religion. They were not orthodox, but they followed generally the principles. And I was the eldest son among 3. And among 3 children, and therefore they had great hopes that I would also take up some kind of a business career and make money as they did. So we were financially quite well off when I was a child, and this was in Trivandrum, which is the capital of Kerala. Although I was born and brought up in Kerala, we used to speak Urdu at home because we do not originally belong to Kerala, but we are 100 years ago settlers to Kerala from the north. Now, behind our house in Trivandrum, which many of our friends have seen the house, there was a very big backyard, the garden, and in that backyard there was a jackfruit tree, big jackfruit tree. Tamil la enna solluvaanga adu jackfruit, panaskai, something like that. Okay. Under the jackfruit tree one evening when I was playing and when everybody else had gone home, it must have been around 6 o'clock, 6:15 in the evening, I saw under the jackfruit tree, which is in the last end of the garden, somebody standing. Now, there was nobody there before, but then when I turned and looked, the person was standing there again. I looked from far. He was a tall man, very fair, bare-bodied, except for a small cloth around the waist, and long hair which was matted and kept like a crown on the head. And he was wearing some beads in his neck, which now I know were the Rudraksha beads, but then I did not know. I have never seen Rudraksha in my life at that age. And he had a water pot in his hand, which now I identify as a kamandalu. So I looked back and he waved his hand in a gesture saying, "Come forward." Normal reaction is at this time to be afraid and not go because there is a stranger standing there, we don't know where he has come from. But I moved forward, and as I approached him close by and stood looking at him, I think I was quite stunned because I was just looking at him and wondering who is this man, because the eyes were extraordinarily bright and large. He gestured for me to go closer, so I went closer. He put his hand on my head and said in Hindi, "When the time comes, everything will be all right." That's the only sentence uttered. "Jab samay hoga, sab theek ho jayega." Now, because we speak Urdu at home, I understood exactly what he said. And then I stood rooted to the spot looking at this person. After some, I don't know, maybe few seconds, he told me, "Wapas jao, go back." So, like a robot, I turned and went back towards the house. Now, the last door at the back of the garden is the kitchen door. So, I came up to the kitchen door and I turned round to see if there was anybody under the jackfruit tree. There was nobody under the jackfruit tree. I am not saying that I saw him disappear, but when I turned and looked, there was nobody there. Now, I went into the kitchen and I remember that my mother was cooking something. Now, what happens when a boy of 9 sees something extraordinary? He has to tell somebody. So, my mother is the nearest person I can talk to. So, I went to my mother and I wanted to tell her that I saw somebody standing under the jackfruit tree and he has blessed me. But every time I tried to say this to her, I could not speak. My throat used to get jammed. My tongue used to get stuck. So, I decided maybe this is not something which we should discuss. I tried it a few times, but it never worked. But something extraordinary happened to me after that time, and that was every night when I went to sleep around midnight, I would be woken up from my sleep, not by anybody, but I used to just wake up. And then we used to all sleep in one room. My father, my mother, we all used to sleep in one room those days. So I had to get up quietly and sit without disturbing anybody. So I used to get up, sit quietly on the bed, sometimes lie down on the bed because I didn't want anybody to see what was happening. And there was a very blissful, happy feeling in the heart center somewhere here, and a kind of silvery light of something rotating. Nobody had taught me anything about this before. So I used to lie down, close my eyes, put both my hands on that area, in that area, and just allow myself to see that light. Sometimes the light would go and I would see those beautiful eyes of the person I saw under the jackfruit tree. Sometimes the eyes would melt away and there would be only this beautiful light which spread throughout the body, and one would feel very, very happy and blissful. This experience continued every night for several years. Apart from that, during this time, I used to have several other experiences about which, even though I have written the autobiography, I don't think it's a good idea to discuss. We'll keep it for the future. Anyway, so this continued. Now, after this, all the books and all the knowledge that is required to walk on the spiritual journey began to unfold itself to me in different ways. Like, if I used to go to the library, you must remember that by now I was growing up. This happened when I was 9, then I was 10, 11. As I grew up, I started visiting the library, and there somebody would say, "Oh, this book is good for you, read it." I would get books by complete works of Swami Vivekananda. At the age of 11 and 12, it's not easy to read Vivekananda, but since I was educated in the English medium, reading English was not a problem for me, and we went to the best schools and I had the best teachers. Still, some things I read and understood, some things I did not. But what I am trying to say is that all the knowledge that is required began to come in mysterious ways. Somebody giving you a book, or you go to the library and you are searching for a book and some book falls from the top and falls in your hands. We cannot explain this. Then I also started meeting people who were highly spiritual and who were in that locality. My first experience of seeing a spiritual person was that one day I was standing in my house when I was maybe 11 years old, wearing shorts and bare-bodied, and from the road I heard some sound of bhajan kirtan. Somebody is playing drums and there is a sound of cymbals. And I was curious, so I went and looked, and I saw that a group of people were playing drums and playing cymbals, and there was one man walking in front, wearing only a kaupin, a small kaupin, covering his private parts, a fair-looking tall man, and his eyes were closed. He was walking, but there were tears coming down his eyes, and he seems to be smiling. This was the first thing I saw. When I saw this, I felt something very nice, and there were two boys were collecting money. So I ran inside, took some money which was lying there, and brought it and gave it to him. Late, and I saw the neighbors coming out and washing the feet of this gentleman who was walking in front. Later on, I came to know that it was someone called Swami Abhedananda, who had an ashram not far from our house in the fort. And when I was in college, I used to visit him frequently and have long chats with him many, many times. This was the first experience, and this continued. Wherever there was a holy man nearby, somehow or the other I would be exposed to that person. This included Hindus, Muslims. There were some Muslim saint. There was a Muslim saint who lived close by, whom I used to go and visit. You might say Muslim saint meaning a Sufi saint, like a dargah. When you go to a dargah, it's not a mosque, it's not a place where you do your prayers. It is a tomb of a great saint. That's called a dargah. A place where people worship is called masjid. But generally both are kept together so that people can go down and then come and worship. And so it continued till the age of 19, when I decided to quit and go off to the Himalayas one fine day. So as I was saying, extraordinary people, whoever came to the neighborhood, I would somehow get an opportunity to meet them. Now I was a little weak in mathematics, so there was a group, a family living near our house, where there was Mr. Ramaswamy, who was actually an accountant in the Accountant General's office, and my friend Marthanda Pillai was his nephew. Marthanda Pillai later on became a very famous neurologist in Trivandrum. He was head of the Department of Neurology in Trivandrum. Now he runs his own hospital. I used to go to their house because Mr. Ramaswamy used to teach me mathematics tuition. So one day when I went there, that must have been when I was around 10 years old. I went to Ramaswamy's house, Marthandan's house, and they told me today there is no tuition. I said, why? No, Swami has come, so there is no tuition. So I said, which Swami has come? No, you will not be interested, some Swamiji has come. Then Marthandan, my friend Marthandan's mother came out, that is Mr. Ramaswamy's aunt, and she said, our Swami, they used to talk in Tamil, they were Pillays settled in Trivandrum. She said, Swami vandirkaru, adanal there is no tuition today. The half Malayalam in the tuition illa. So I said, all right. Then I said, can I also see the Swami? She said, I will have to find out, you stand here. So she went inside. It was a small house with little doors, old model house. She went inside, and after some time she came out and she said, come inside. So I go inside. There is a small drawing room, very small. In that there is one chair in the middle. On that chair somebody is sitting. Agarbattis are lit and some people are standing around like this. And there is a man sitting in front. Now normally if you see a Swami, you will think somebody with kashaya, vastra or some matted, nothing. Hair short cut, like a summer crop, white hair, well built, clean shaved, slack shirt up to here, white slack shirt, nicely ironed, white dhoti, and one white cloth tied like a cross belt. Individual sitting there. They have put a small footstool to put his legs on. So he saw me. They must have told who I was. So he very lovingly said, Malayalam, come here. So I went, come here, sit down. So I sat down. Then he put his hands on my head and massaged the head nicely. And he said, Nalla kutti, good boy. He said, good boy. He kept on repeating this. And then I looked at his eyes. Now these eyes were also quite powerful. They were not so big, they were small eyes, but there was something very quite extraordinary about it, because for some time my mind became absolutely blank. There was nothing, there was no thinking, there was nothing. I don't know how to describe it. For some time I was in a vacuum, and then I quickly woke up because he was still rubbing my head, and I got up. I also did namaskaram. I saw everybody doing namaskaram, so we are not accustomed to doing namaskaram in the house. I did namaskaram and I came off. That was my only meeting with this great man. Later on, I came to know through various sources, also by reading a book, which are his little talks, that his name was Gopala Swami. His name was actually Gopala Pillai, and he was working in the Accountant General's office or something, took voluntary retirement. He was there, and I don't think he was in the Accountant General's office. he used to go to court every day because he had many property cases.